Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing in The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris, and we are on Book 3, Chapter 7, entitled An Adventure by the Way. When morrow dawned, they arose betimes, and did on their worldly raiment. And when they had eaten a morsel, they made them ready for the road. And the elder gave them victual for the way in their saddle-bags, saying, This shall suffice for the passing of days, and when it is gone, ye have learned what to do. Therewithal they gat to horse, but Ralph would have the elder ride his nag, while he went afoot by the side of Ursula. So the sage took his bidding, but smiled therewith, and said, Thou art a king's son, and a friendly young man, else had I said nay to this, for it needeth not. Whereas I am stronger than thou, so hath my draught of the well dealt with me. Thus then they went their ways. But Ralph noted of Ursula that she was silent and shy with him, and it irked him so much. So at last he said to her, My friend, doth aught ail me with thee? Wilt thou not tell me that I may amend it? For thou art grown a few words with me, and turnest thee from me, and seemest as if thou heedest me little. Thou art as a fair spring morning gone cold and overcast in the afternoon. What is it then? We are going a long journey together, and belike shall find little help or comfort, save in each other. And ill will it be if we shall fall asunder in heart, though we be nigh in body. She laughed and reddened therewithal, and then her countenance fell, and she looked piteously on him, and said, If I seem to thee as thou sayest, I am sorry, for I meant not to be thus with thee, as thou deemest. But so it is that I was thinking of this long journey, and of thee and me together in it, and how we shall be with each other if we come back again alive, with all things done that we had to do. She stayed her speech a while, and seemed to find it hard to give forth the word that was in her. But at last she said, Friend, thou must pardon me. But that which thou sawest in me, I also seemed to see in thee, that thou wert grown shy and cold with me. But now I know it is not so, since thou hast seen me wrongly, but that I have seen thee wrongly, as thou hast me. Therewith she reached her hand to him, and he took it, and kissed it, and caressed it, while she looked fondly at him, and they fared on sweetly and happily together. But as this was a saying and a doing betwixt them, and a while after, they had heeded the elder little or not at all, though he rode on the right hand of Ralph. And for his part the old man said naught to them, and made as if he heard them not, when they spake thuswise together. Now they rode the wood on somewhat level ground for a while. Then the trees began to thin, and the ground grew broken, and at last it was very rugged, with high hills and deep valleys, and all the land populous of wild beasts, so that about sunset they heard thrice the roar of a lion. But ever the sage led them by winding ways that he knew, round the feet of the hills, along stream sides for the most part, and by passes over the mountain necks, when they needs must, which was twice in the day. Dusk fell on them in a little valley, through which ran a stream bushed about its edges, and which for the rest was grassy and pleasant, with big sweet chestnut trees scattered about it. Now, quoth the elder, 2 things have we to beware of in this valley. The lions first, which, though belike they will not fall upon weaponed men, may well be on an onslaught on your horses, if they wind them, and the loss of the beasts were sore to you as now. But the second thing is the chase from Utterbol. As to the lions, if ye build up a big fire and keep somewhat aloof from the stream and its bushes, and tether your horses anigh the fire, ye will have no harm of them. Yea, said Ralph, but if the riders of Utterbol are anigh us, shall we light a candle for them to show them the way? Said the sage, Were ye by yourselves, I would bid you journey night long, and run all risk, rather than the risk of falling into their hands. But whereas I am your guide, I bid you kindle your fire under yonder big tree, and leave me to deal with the men of Utterbol. Only whatso I bid you, that do ye straightway. So be it, said Ralph. I have been betrayed so oft of late that I must needs trust thee, or all help shall fail me. Let us to work. So they fell to and built up a big bale and kindled it, and their horses they tethered to the tree. And by then they had done this, dark night had fallen upon them. So they cooked their victual at the fire, for Ralph had shot a hare by the way, and the sage went down to the stream and fetched them water in a leathern budget. For, said he, I know the beasts of the woods, and they me, and there is peace betwixt us. There then they sat to meat unarmed, for the sage had said to them, Doff your armor, ye shall not come to handy strokes with the Utterbol riders. So they ate their meat in the wilderness, and were nowise ungleeful, for to those twain the world seemed fair, and they hoped for great things. But though they were glad, they were weary enough, for the way had been both rugged and long. So they lay them down to sleep while the night was yet young. But or ever Ralph closed his eyes, he saw the sage standing up with his cloak wrapped about his head, and making strange signs with his right hand, so that he deemed that he would ward them by wizardry. So therewith he turned about on the grass and was asleep at once. After a while he started and sat up, half awake at first, for he felt someone touched him. And his half-dreams went back to past days, and he cried out, Ah, Roger, is it thou? What is toward? But therewith he woke up fully, and knew that it was the sage that had touched him, and withal he saw hard by Ursula sitting up also. There was still a flickering flame playing about the red embers of their fire, for they made it very big, and the moon had arisen, and was shining bright in a cloudless sky. The sage spake softly but quickly, Lie down together, ye two, and I shall cast my cloak over you, and look to it that ye stir not from out of it, nor speak one word till I bid you, whate'er may befall, for the riders of Utterbol are upon us. They did as he bade them, but Ralph got somewhat of an eye-shot out of a corner of the cloak, and he could see that the sage went and stood up against the tree trunk holding a horse by the bridle, one on each side of him. Even therewith Ralph heard the clatter of horse hoofs over the stones about the stream, and a man's voice cried out, They will have heard us, so spur over the grass to the fire in the big tree, for then they cannot escape us. Then came the thump of horse hoofs on the turf, and in half a minute they were amidst of a rout of men a horseback, more than a score, whose armor and weapons gleamed in the moonlight. Yet when these riders were gotten there, they were silent, till one said in a quavering voice, as if afeard, Otter, Otter, what is this? A minute ago we could see the fire, and the tree, and men and horses about them, and now, lo you, there is naught save two great grey stones lying on the grass, and a man's bare bones leaning up against the tree, and a ruckle of old horse bones on either side of him. Where are we, then? Then spake another, and Ralph knew the voice of Otter's. I wot not, lord, naught else is changed save the fire and the horses and the men. Yonder are the hills, yonder overhead is the moon, with the little light cloud dogging her. Even that is scarce changed. Belike the fire was an earth fire, and for the rest we saw wrong in the moonlight. Spake the first man again, and his voice quavered yet more. Nay, nay, Otter, it is not so. Lo, you the skeleton and the bones and the grey stones, and the fire here this minute, there the next. O Otter, this is an evil place, of an evil deed. Let us go seek elsewhere. Let us depart, lest a worse thing befall us. And so, with no more ado, he turned his horse and smote his spurs into him and galloped off by the way he had come, and the others followed, nothing loth. Only Otter tarried a little, and looked round him and laughed and said, There goes my lord's nephew. Like my lord, he is not over-bold, save in dealing with a shackled man. Well, for my part, if those others have sunk into the earth, or gone up into the air, they are welcome to their wizardry, and I am glad of it. For I know not how I should have done to see my mate that out-tilted me made a gelded wretch of. And it would have irked me to see that fair woman in the hands of the tormentors, though forsooth I have oft seen such sights. Well, it is good, but better were it to ride with my mate than serve the devil and his nephew. Therewith he turned rein and galloped off after the others, and in a little while the sound of them had died off utterly into the night, and they heard but the voices of wild things, and the wimbrel laughing from the hillsides. Then came the sage and drew the cloak from those two and laughed on them and said, Now may ye sleep soundly, when I have mended our fire, for ye will see no more of Utterbol for this time, and it yet lacks 3 hours of dawn. Sleep ye then, and dream of each other. Then they arose and thanked the sage with whole hearts, and praised his wisdom. But while the old man mended the fire, Ralph went up to Ursula, and took her hand, and said, Welcome to life, fellow farer. And he gazed earnestly into her eyes, as though he would have had her fall into his arms. But whereas she rather shrank from him, though she looked on him lovingly, if somewhat shyly, he but kissed her hand and laid him down again when he had seen her lying in her place, and therewith they fell asleep and slept sweetly. Chapter 8. They come to the Sea of Molten Rocks. When they woke again, the sun was high above their heads, and they saw the sage dighting their breakfast. So they arose and washed the night off them in the stream, and ate hastily, and got to horse on a fair forenoon. Then they rode the mountain neck east from that valley, and it was a long slope of stony and barren mountain, nigh waterless. And on the way Ursula told Ralph how the man who was scared by the wizardry last night was verily the nephew of the lord from whom she had stolen her armor by wheedling and a seeming promise. But, she said, his love lay not so deep, but that he would have avenged him for my guile on my very body had he taken us. Ralph reddened and scowled at her word, and the sage led them into other talk. So long was that fell that they were nigh benighted ere they gained the topmost, or came to any pass. When they had come to a place where there was a little pool in a hollow of the rocks, they made stay there and slept safe, but ill lodged. And on the morrow were they on their way betimes, and went toiling up the neck another 4 hours, and came to a long rocky ridge or crest that ran athwart it. And when they had come to the brow thereof, then they were face to face with the great mountains, which now looked so huge that they seemed to fill all the world save the ground whereon they stood. Cloudless was the day, and the air clean and sweet, and every nook and cranny was clear to behold from where they stood. There were great jutting nesses, with straight-walled bergs at their topmost, and pyramids and pinnacles that no hand of man had fashioned, and awful clefts like long streets in the city of the giants who wrought the world, and high above all the undying snow that looked as if the sky had come down to the mountains, and they were upholding it as a roof. But clear as was the fashion of the mountains, they were yet a long way off, for betwixt them and the ridge whereon these fellows stood stretched a vast plain, houseless and treeless, and as they beheld it, they thence grey and ungrassed, though indeed it was not wholly so, like a huge river or firth of the sea it seemed. And such indeed it had been once, to wit, a flood of molten rock in the old days when the earth was a-burning. Now as they stood and beheld it, the sage spake, Lo, ye my children, the castle and its outwork, and its dike that wardeth the land of the well at the world's end. Now from tomorrow, when we enter into the great sea of the rock molten in the ancient earth fires, there is no least peril of pursuit for you. Yet amidst that sea should ye perish belike, were it not for the wisdom gathered by a few, and they are dead now save for the book, and for me who read it unto you. Now ye would not turn back where I bid you, and I will not bid you. Yet since the journey shall yet be with grievous toil and much peril, and shall try the very hearts within you, were you as wise as Solomon and as mighty as Alexander, I will say this much unto you, that if ye love not the earth and the world with all your souls, and will not strive all ye may to be frank and happy therein, your toil and peril aforesaid shall win you no blessing, but a curse. Therefore I bid you be no tyrants or builders of cities for merchants and usurers and warriors and thralls, like the fool who builded Goldburg to be for a tomb to him, or like the thrall-masters of the Burg of the Four Friths, who even now, it may be, are pierced by their own staff or overwhelmed by their own wall. But rather I bid you to live in peace and patience, without fear or hatred, and to succor the oppressed and love the lovely, and to be the friends of men, so that when you are dead at last, men may say of you, They brought down heaven to the earth for a little while. What say ye, children? Then said Ralph, Father, I will say the sooth about mine intent, though ye deem it little-minded. When I have accomplished this quest, I would get me home again to the little land of Upmeads, to see my father and my mother, and to guard its meadows from waste, and its houses from fire-raising, to hold war aloof, and walk in free fields, and see my children growing up about me, and lie at last beside my fathers in the choir of St. Lawrence. The dead would I love and remember, the living would I love and cherish, and earth shall be the well-beloved houses of my fathers, and heaven the highest hall thereof. It is well, said the sage. All this shalt thou do, and be no little heart, though thou do no more. And thou, maiden? She looked on Ralph and said, I lost, and then I found, and then I lost again. Maybe I shall find the lost once more, and for the rest, and all that this man will do, I will help, living or dead, for I know not better to do. Again it is well, said the sage, and the lost which was verily thine shalt you find again, and good days and their ending shall betide thee. Ye shall have no shame in your lives, and no fear in your deaths. Wherefore now lieth a road free before you. Then was he silent a while, neither spake the others aught, but stood gazing on the dark grey plain, and the blue wall that rose beyond it, till at last the sage lifted up his hand and said, Look yonder, children, to where I point, and ye shall see how there thrusteth out a ness from the mountain wall. And the end of it stands like a bastion above the lava sea, and on its sides and its heads are streaks ruddy and tawny, where the earth fires have burnt not so long ago. See ye? Ralph looked and said, Yea, father, I see it, and its rifts and its ridges and its crannies. Quoth the sage, Behind that ness shall ye come to the rock of the fighting man, which is the very gate of the mountains. And I will not turn again, nor bid ye farewell till I have brought you thither. And now time presses, and I would have you come timely to that cavern, whereof I have taught you, before ye shall fall in the first days of winter, or ye shall be hard bestead. So now we will eat a morsel, and then use diligence that we may reach the beginning of the rock sea before nightfall. So did they, and the sage led them down by a slant way from off the ridge, which was toilsome but nowise perilous. So about sunset they came down into the plain, and found a belt of greensward, and waters therein betwixt the foot of the ridge and the edge of rock sea. And as for the said sea, though from afar it looked plain and unbroken, now that they were close to and on level with it, they saw that it rose up into cliffs, broken down in some places, and in others arising high into the air 100 foot it might be. Sometimes it thrust out into the green shore below the fell, and otherwise drew back from it, as it had cooled ages ago. So they came to a place where there was a high wall of rock round 3 sides of a grassy place by a stream side, and there they made their resting place, and the night went calmly and sweetly with them. Chapter 9. They come forth from the rock sea. On the morrow the sage led them straight into the rock sea, whereas it seemed to them at first that he was but bringing them into a blind alley. But at the end of the bight the rock wall was broken down into a long scree of black stones. There the sage bade Ralph and Ursula dismount. As for him, he had been going afoot ever since that first day, and they led the horses up the said scree, which was a hard business, as they were no mountain beasts. And when they were atop of the scree, it was harder yet to get them down, for on that side it was steeper. But at last they brought it about, and came down into a little grassy plain or isle in the rock sea, which narrowed toward the eastern end. And the rocks on either side were smooth and glossy, as if the heat had gone out of them suddenly, when the earth fires had ceased in the mountains. Now the sage showed them on a certain rock a sign cut, whereof they had learned in the book aforesaid, to wit, a sword crossed by a 3-leaved bough. And they knew by the book that they should press on through the rock sea nowhere, either going or returning, save where they should see this token. Now when they came to the narrow end of the plain, they found still a wide way between the rock walls, that whiles widened out and whiles drew in again. Whiles withal were the screes across the path, and little waters that ran out of the lava and into again, and great blocks of fallen stone, sometimes as big as a husbandman's cot, that wind and weather had rent from the rocks, and all these things stayed them somewhat. And they went on merrily, albeit their road winded so much that the sage told them, when evening was, that for their diligence they had come but a few short miles as the crow flies. Many wild things there were, both beast and fowl, in these islands and bridges of the rock sea. Hares and connies to wit, and many an heathfowl, and here and there a red fox lurking about the crannies of the rock wall. Ralph shot a brace of conies with his Turk bow, and whereas there were bushes growing in the chinks, and no lack of whin and ling, they had firing enough, and supped off his venison of the rocks. So passed that day and 2 days more, and naught befell, save that one of the midnight of the first day of their wending the rock sea, Ralph awoke and saw the sky all ablaze with other light than that of the moon. So he arose and went hastily to the sage and took him by the shoulder and bid him awake. For meseems the sky is afire, and perchance the foe is upon us. The sage awoke and opened his eyes and rose on his elbow and looked around sleepily. Then he said, laughing, "It is not, fair lord, that thou mayest lie down and sleep out the remnant of the night, and thou also, maiden. This is but an earth fire breaking out on the flank of the mountains. It may be far away hence. Now ye see that ye may not scale the rocks about us here without toil, but tomorrow night we may climb up somewhere and look on what is toward." So Ralph lay down, and Ursula also. But Ralph lay long awake, watching the light above him, which grew fiercer and redder in the hours betwixt moonset and daybreak, when he fell asleep, and woke not again till the sun was nigh. But on the next day as they went, the aspect of the rock sea about them changed. For the rocks were not so smooth and shining and orderly, but rose up in confused heaps, all clotted together by the burning, like the clinkers out of some monstrous forge of the earth giants. So that their way was not so clear as it had been, but was rather a maze of jagged stone. But the sage led through it all unfumbling, and moreover now and again they came on that carven token of the sword in the bow. Night fell, and as it grew dark, they saw the glaring of the earth fires again. And when they were rested and had done their meat, the sage said, "Come now with me, for hard by is there a place, as it were a stair that goeth to the top of a great rock. Let us climb it and look about us." So did they, and the head of the rock was higher than the main face of the rock sea, so that they could see afar. Thence they looked north, and beheld afar off a very pillar of fire rising up from a ness of the mountain wall, and seeming as if it bore up a black roof of smoke. And the huge wall gleamed grey because of its light, and it cast a ray of light across the rock sea, as the moon doth over the waters of the deep. Withal there was the noise as of the thunder in the air, but afar off, which thunder indeed they had heard oft as they rode through the afternoon and evening. Spake the sage, "It is far away. Yet if the wind were not blowing from us, we had smelt the smoke, and the sky had been darkened by it. Now it is not so far from Utterbol, and it will be for a token to them there, for that ness is called the Candle of the Giants, and men deem that the kindling thereof forebodeth ill to the Lord who sitteth on the throne in the red hall of Utterbol." Ralph laid his hand on Ursula's shoulder and said, "May the sage's saw be sooth." She put her hand upon the hand and said, 3 months ago I lay on my bed at Burton Abbas, and all the while here was this huge manless waste lying under the bare heavens, and threatened by the storehouse of the fires of the earth. And had I not seen it, nor thee either, O friend, and now it hath become a part of me forever." Then was Ralph exceeding glad of her words, and the sage laughed inwardly when he beheld them thus. So they came adown from the rock, and lay down presently under the fiery heavens. and their souls were comforted by the sound of the horses cropping the grass so close to their ears that it broke the voice of the earth fire's thunder, that ever and anon rolled over the grey sea amidst which they lay. On the morrow they still rode the lava like to clinkers, and it rose higher about them, till suddenly nigh sunset it ended at a turn of their winding road, and naught lay betwixt them and that mighty ness of the mountains, save a wide grassy plain, here and there swelling into low wide risings, not to be called hills, and besprinkled with copses of bushes, and with trees neither great nor high. Then spake the sage, Here now we will rest, and by my will tomorrow also, that your beasts may graze their fill of the sweet grass of these unwarded meadows, which feedeth many a herd unowned of man, albeit they pay a quitrent to wild things that be mightier than they. And now, children, we have passed over the mighty river that once ran molten betwixt these mountains and the hills yonder to the west, which we trod the other day. Yet once more, if your heart fails you, there is time to turn back, and no harm shall befall you. But I will be your fellow all the way home to Swevenham, if you will. But if you still crave the water of the well at the world's end, I will lead you over this green plain, and then go back home to mine hermitage, and abide there till ye come to me, or I die. Ralph smiled and said, Master, no such sorry story shall I bear back to Upmeads, that after many sorrows borne and perils overcome, I came to the gates of the mountains, and turned back for fear of that which I had not proved. So spake he. But Ursula laughed and said, Yea, then should I deem thy friendship light, if thou leftest me alone and unholpen in the uttermost wilderness, and thy manhood like to turn back from that which did not make a woman afraid. Then the sage looked kindly on them and said, Yea, then is the last word spoken, and the world may yet grow merrier to me. Look you, some there may be who abuse gifts of the well for evil errands, and some who may use it for good deeds. But I am one who hath not dared to use it, lest I should abuse it, I being alone amongst weaklings and fools. But now, if ye come back, who knows but that I may fear no longer, but use my life, and grow to be a mighty man? Come now, let us dight our supper, and kindle as big a fire as we lightly may, since there is many a prowling beast about, as bear and lynx and lion, for they haunt this edge of the rock sea, where the harts and the wild bulls and the goats resort for the sweet grass and the water that floweth forth from the lava. So they cut good store of firing, whereas there was plenty of bushes growing in the clefts of the rock, and they made a big fire and tethered their horses anigh it when they lay down to rest. And in the night they heard the roaring of wild things round about them, and more than once or twice, awakening before day, they saw the shape of some terrible creature by the light of the moon mingled with the glare of the earth fires. But none of these meddled with them, and naught befell them save the coming of the new day. Chapter 10. They come to the gate of the mountains. That day they herded their horses thereabout, and from time to time the sage tried those two, if they were perfect in the lore of the road, and he found that they had missed nothing. They lay down in the selfsame place again that night, and arose betimes on the morrow, and went their ways over the plain as the sage led, till it was as if the mountains and their terror hung over their very heads, and the hugeness and blackness of them were worse than a wall of fire had been. It was still a long way to them, so that it was not till noon of the third day from the rock sea that they came to the very feet of that fire-scorched ness. And wonderful indeed it seemed to them that anything save the eagles could have aught to tell of what lay beyond it. There were no foothills or downs betwixt the plain and the mountains, naught save a tumble of rocks that had fallen from the cliffs, piled up strangely and making a maze through which the sage led them surely. And at last they were clear of even this, and were underneath the flank of that ness, which was so huge that there seemed that there could scarce be no other mountain than that. Little of its huge height could they see, now they were close to it, for it went up sheer at first, and then beetled over them till they could see no more of its side. As they wound about its flank, and they were long about it, The sage cried out to those two, and stretched out his hand, and behold, the side of the black cliff plain and smooth and shining, as if it had been done by the hand of men or giants. And on this smooth space was carven in the living rock the image of a warrior in mail and helm of ancient fashion, and holding a sword in his right hand. From head to heel he seemed some 60 feet high, and the rock was so hard that he was all clean and clear to see, and they deemed of him that his face was keen and stern of aspect. So there they stood in an awful bight of the mountain, made by that ness, and the main wall from which it thrust out. But after they had gazed a while, and their hearts were in their mouths, the sage turned on those twain, and said, Here then is the end of my journey with you. Ye wot all that I can tell you, and I can say no word more, save to bid you cast all fear aside and thrive. Ye have yet for this day's journey certain hours of such daylight as the mountain pass will give you, which at the best is little better than twilight. Therefore redeem ye the time. But Ralph got off his horse, and Ursula did in likewise, and they both kissed and embraced the old man, for their hearts were full and fain. But he drew himself away from them, and turned about with no word more, and went his ways, and presently was hidden from their eyes by the rocky maze which lay about the mountain's foot. Then the twain mounted their horses again, and set forth silently on the road as they had been bidden. In a little while the rocks of the pass closed about them, leaving about a way so narrow that they could see a glimmer of the stars above them as they rode the twilight. No sight they had of the measureless stony desert, yet in their hearts they saw it. They seemed to be winding a straight-walled prison without an end, so that they were glad when the dark night came on them. Ralph found some shelter in the cleft of a rock above a mound where was little grass for horses. He drew Ursula into it, and they sat down there on the stones together. So long they sat silent that a great gloom settled upon Ralph, and he scarce knew whether he were asleep or waking, alive or dead. But amidst of it fell a sweet voice on his ears, and familiar words asking him what it were like in the fields of Upmeads, and the flowers, and of the fish of its water, and of the fashion of the building of his father's house, and of his brethren, and the mother that bore him. Then was it to him at first as if a sweet dream had come across the void of his gloom. And then at last the gloom and the dread and the deadness left him, and he knew that his friend and fellow was talking to him, and that he sat by her knee to knee. And the sweetness of her savored in his nostrils as she leaned her face toward him, and he knew himself for what he was. And yet for memory of that past horror and the sweetness of his friend and what not else, he fell a-weeping. But Ursula bestirred herself, and brought out food from her wallet. She sat down beside him again, and he wiped the tears from his eyes and laughed, and chid himself for being as a child in the dark. And then they ate and drank together in that dusk nook of the wilderness. And now was he happy, and his tongue was loosed, and he fell to telling her many things of Upmeads, of the tale of his forefathers, and of his old loves and his friends, till life and death seemed to him as they had seemed of time past in the merry land of his birth. So there anon they fell asleep for weariness, and no dreams of terror beset their slumbers. This is the end of chapters 7 through 10 of Book 3 of The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. In the next video we will proceed to chapter 11, entitled They Come to the Vale of Sweet Chestnuts. Thank you for listening.